Hey, I'm Suzanne Tidkemeyer. I used to write for Pathos, a column called No Longer Quivering that had to do with the quiverful and evangelical movement. Man, I'm stuttering all over. And I wrote about the evangelical movement, the non-denominational, high-demand religious organization groups, or as I sometimes call them, the TACO, because that's Totalitarian, Authoritative Church Organization, which is the same thing as saying non-denominational, high-demand, evangelical church. So I'm going to do my review of the Righteous Gemstones in just a second. First, I want to say, um, don't pick on anybody I talk about ever, ever, ever. Don't harass them. Don't do anything. I know you guys are just wonderful people. Don't do that stuff, but I still have to throw that disclaimer out there because there are the one or two wackos that will take it the wrong way. Um, and these are my opinions. I'm looking at the righteous gemstones, at the theology and the theological lessons that can be taken away from it. There is a lot to unpack. And episode 2 was not so much about um, theology, but there were some interesting things that it brought up. So I have packaged episode 2 and episode 3 together. They're both distinctly different, but they're both not as easy to point to all the things as it would be another episode. If I had to summarize episode 2 with a quick little sentence, I would call it Serpents in the Garden, because it definitely was all about betrayals and Judases, the entire thing. And let me just warn everybody, there's spoilers galore. So if you haven't seen The Righteous Gemstones and you don't want it spoilered, see ya. If not, then I'm about to talk about it. We start with where we ended, with Jesse trying to pay off the blackmailers in the devil mask, the devil, which was kind of fitting. And Jesse is with his somewhat loony sister Judy and his baby brother Calvin, and they're trying to pay off the guys. Now, when we saw the end of episode 1, it was from the perspective of Jesse et al. This time it is told from the perspective of the people in the van, of the devil and his companions. And we get, okay, we get the devil. He is talking mad crap in the van about what they're going to do in Thailand, all the lady boys are going to have fun with. And we're viewing the entire sequence from the devil's view, which is an interesting and opposing viewpoint than Jesse's, which I think that's important to keep in mind with any of these religious people, especially. Their viewpoint is not necessarily the reality viewpoint. So it is interesting seeing the sequence from both directions, and I really appreciated that. We get our first glimpse of Gideon. Gideon is Jesse's runaway son, the eldest one they're not allowed to talk about. Gideon is part of the blackmailers. Gideon is the Judas in this episode. There's betrayal, there's miracles. So Judy is claiming that these people just disappearing and nobody knowing where they went, the blackmailers, is a miracle. This is a very, very, very common evangelical way to look at things from a very simplistic point of view. You get that parking space right next to the front door of Walmart. That's a miracle. I am God's favor. So that's that childish way to look at things instead of the deeper miracles. And they start squabbling about what they're going to do with the $1 million plus that Judy has taken from the church. And Judy made me laugh with this thing she said about it. Judy wants to keep the money 100% herself. She said, I stole that money fair and square. I mentioned last time that thievery in the evangelical church is not unheard of. I knew of at least 2 cases, maybe 3, where there was quite a bit of money stolen. And so there's not a whole lot of theology, but there's a lot of laughs. Scotty, completely bare, rear-ended, pushing his girlfriend out of the hospital after they both end up in the hospital after that hot mess of a confloption of a exchange of blackmail funds where Jesse took the blackmail funds back and Jesse and Judy ran over the blackmailers. So that's what they were doing in the hospital in the first place. So you got Scotty pushing her out of there. They're going against medical advice. They're leaving just like that. And Gideon is trailing them like so incredibly unsure of himself. He just looks like he is very confused and not happy about any of this. And then a few sequences later, Jesse utters the most, I consider it the most hateful word that I've ever heard come out of evangelicals' mouths. When I left my old church, this word was hurled at me again and again and again. And all I did was move from one church to another church. I didn't start riding the goat backwards. I didn't start going, Hail Satan. I didn't do any of that. I didn't even start dancing naked around the fire or any of the fun stuff. I wasn't having any of the fun times. But this word got hurled at me, and it's quite hateful and hurtful. Those of us that have left that particular world have heard this horrible word thrown at ourselves again and again and again. Jesse calls Gideon an apostate. Apostate. It's something they like to do in the naming, blaming, shaming game. And Jesse didn't have a lot of room to talk. That's the other part of this whole Judas and the hypocrites. There is so much hypocrisy going on in the Righteous Gemstone family, it's not even funny. And this is another example of it. Jesse rolling around with his silly little posse of friends, snorting coke, running around with naked ladies of the night, the whole 9 yards on that incriminating video, and so many other things. Lucy, who is Scotty's girlfriend, figures out that they dumped her down a hillside into a ditch at first because they thought she was dead. So Lucy really just chooses scenery and tells them all off, and I just laughed. She called she called her boyfriend Scotty the funniest thing I've ever heard. And I wish I could say the word, but YouTube would spank me. And then we hit another theme that's very popular in evangelical town, using people for what they can do for you. Kelvin, Jesse, and Judy figure out they need to get the DMV record and be able to see on the DMV cameras the red van because they have the license plate number. So what are they going to do? Well, it turns out Keith works at the DMV. What's the chances of that? And they go to Keith and say, hey, can you look this up for us? And Keith tells them, says, I could lose my job over this. And they're kind of like, psh. This is common, where they will use you. They don't care if they get your job, if you lose your job or whatever. The thing is making goals. So that was really just very true, I felt. Finding out in this episode that Gideon had sold out his daddy was kind of a shock, and it kind of wasn't. Because Gideon left there before the series ever started on very bad terms with his father. We see his little brother Pontius going the same direction. Pontius. Going the same direction, the same bad direction. Where he's fighting with Jesse and cussing him out. It's actually pretty normal. I know so many people who were preachers' kids. They either go one way or another. They either go super rebellious or they go super submissive. Phineas and Gideon have gone super, super rebellious, and that's very common. My own grandfather was a preacher's kid who was super rebellious, so I saw this firsthand with my own family. And then we have the backyard shooting gallery. I don't know if they're in the backyard, but they are clearly somewhere on the Gemstone property. I have Jesse, you have Amber, you have guns. That's the other very common thing in evangelical town is don't touch my guns because I might need them to overthrow the government. That is something that goes part and parcel with all this belief system, which is a really wrong thing that has led in a lot of ways to some of the Christian nationalism we're seeing now, the racism, all of that. It comes out of this super fear, and the guns are part of that. We see when it ends, there's literally a snake. There's a snake. I don't know my snakes, but I'm going to guess it's a rattler from what I saw. In Eli's kitchen. Eli reaches for a piece of pie in the fridge, and next thing he turns around, there's a rattler there fixing to strike. And he grabbed him, picked him up. Eli's enough of a country boy to know how to handle a snake. That's why I said there's snakes in the garden with this one. And at that exact moment, Gideon returns home. The prodigal has returned. And we're out. That was episode 2. Episode 3, there was a lot of the prodigal son in it because you had Gideon coming back and you had the family really trying to embrace him, except for Jesse, who's still pissed off, and rightfully so in his own little weird way. His son left the house, swearing he didn't need the family, didn't need any of that, and he has now come back with his tail between his legs, not apologizing, but clearly in a different place. Jesse is right to be suspicious of Gideon because Gideon has returned only to fleece the family. That's what this is all about. And we started off this episode with the funniest thing ever. Uncle Baby Billy, naked in a bathtub with his new wife, Tiffany. And then we have Uncle Baby Billy standing up, and just like that, we have naked penis again. This show makes me laugh. There's so much male frontal nudity, but I don't think I've seen any female frontal nudity except for the ladies of the night. So that makes me laugh. Jesse and his very upset with Gideon and not wanting to forgive him and let him back in the family is insisting that Gideon come to church. And Gideon is up in his room trying to steel himself up. It's kind of like me when I go visit my husband's church and call like, I gotta do this. And so Gideon goes to church at the Gemstone Prayer Center where Uncle Baby Billy is about to take over as pastor. Uncle Baby Billy is Eli Gemstone's brother-in-law, the baby brother of his deceased wife, Amy Lee. They used to do a song together. They were country stars as little kids. So I have to break into this a little bit. The Gemstone Prayer Center is supposed to be in Locust Grove, which is a fictional location near Charleston. Fictional, because if you notice, they never really tell you what North Carolina city that they're in. They are in Charleston. There's no Locust Grove, but the Gemstone Prayer Center is in North Charleston. How do I know this? Because our own family, we're one of these families where before COVID, we would pick a place that was centrally located that none of us had ever been to before and had Christmas. One year it was the year that Righteous Gemstones premiered. That year, Charleston was the city we chose, and we all loved Charleston. But one day my husband and I were driving around by the North Charleston Mall trying to get a couple of errands run, stuff we can't get in Costa Rica. And what did we come upon? We came upon the Gemstone Prayer Center in this fictitious Locust Grove. So I've gotten a big kick out of the show because I've now seen a lot of places where they filmed, and one of the things that I've seen is that Gemstone Prayer Center. I started hollering. My husband stopped the car. I didn't know what the hell had happened. So Eli and Baby Billy wants something more than just this prayer center out in the middle of nowhere. And Eli and Baby Billy start doing an evangelical dick measuring contest about who's the most powerful and who has the most charisma and the most fans, and it was just pretty silly, and that's pretty common too. You'll see that with pastors trying to respect their brother pastor, but at the same time, like flexing, like I've got this. And it was interesting, I thought, because the worship music they had at the Gemstone Prayer Center, Locust Grove, has a country flavor. Whereas the two episodes before, when they had worship music, was more your contemporary rock and roll, sort of corporate rock and roll sound, which is also very common in worship music. We get to see Gideon is confused and horrified by the entire thing. He's sitting there like, and the ultimate in prodigal sons, but here's the thing with him being the prodigal son. He could see clearly how much hypocrisy is going on and how much insincerity, and it's pretty stomach turning to him, if I had to guess. It doesn't help that when the Gemstones come out, that the other common thing for evangelical town has happened. Somebody has thrown major shade. Johnny Seasons has papered the parking lot with the paperwork showing the worst of the Gemstones. A cartoon with all of their little secrets on it, the DUIs, the bankruptcies, all of that on there. So greed is the big takeaway of this episode. The kind of greed that we sometimes see in evangelical communities where somebody's looking at somebody and they have more than they've got greed, but they don't want to call it that. They'll say, oh, I hope bad things happen to them. They didn't deserve that. They don't know what they're doing. And so you're looking at how they have accomplished things and wondering what they had to do and where the bodies are buried. There's a lot of that goes on. And then we have Gideon doing a complete inventory of everything the family owns of value. So that's another type of greed. So he is trying to push us off to Scotty so that Scotty will go in there and rob the place and take the shit and just sell it in order to satisfy the $1 million without them having to rob the place. Doesn't quite work that way. Jesse calls a meeting with his hype man, his little gang of 4, with Gregory, Levi, Chad, and Matthew. And it was funny in so many ways, and there's also greed there, and there is the kind of suspicion and things that happen sometimes in these closed religious organizations. Gregory has coins that say, "We did it!" He tries to give out, and that is just so typical of wanting to commemorate something as a miracle of God that somebody helped in, that I've seen so many times. Most of the time you don't mint a coin, though. That was pretty extreme. Jesse pulled a knife on Levi and accused Levi of being the blackmailer because Levi doesn't have a wife and he wasn't quite participating in quite as much of the stuff as the rest of Jesse and his pals were doing. So there's this whole pushy shovey that goes on with that, where they're comparing themselves to each other and whose righteousness is better and whose isn't, which is Typical. Now, I laughed my ass off when Eli and Billy ended up going, Uncle Baby Billy ended up going to Johnny Season's church for a potluck. Now, we know that evangelical churches, they love their potlucks. They love them in a way that you cannot imagine. And so I was glad to see them portray that. Because that's something that I've seen so many times and worked so many times in my old church. These silly potlucks for every event you could think of. So they had this potluck. There was more dig measuring between Eli and Johnny Seasons. Uncle Baby Billy tried to broker the peace, and that did not go well. And Eli ends up throwing a potato through the steeple window. I could not believe it. I laugh every time that scene comes on because it's so absurdist, but so, yeah, I can see that for the whole thing. And Eli exhibits that he himself is greedy. He wants more. So greed is the password. It is, like Judas and betrayals were the theme of episode 2. Greed is greed and hypocrisy are the main themes of episode 3. So Gideon tells his father and Martin that he wants to understand how the church operates. He wants to help out anywhere he can. They don't know that the only reason he wants to do that is so that he can figure out where the money is and he can help Scotty rob the place blind to get the $1 million. So Eli and Uncle Baby Billy, they start scrapping and fussing again about who's the most popular and if the role that Uncle Baby Billy is to play at the Gemstone Prayer Center is actually worth a damn. And there's some very vile words that are thrown between the two of them. Very vile. And then we cut to Pontius fighting with his dad at the dinner table in front of the entire family. Filthy words. And then at the end, I was glad to see there were apologies. At least Eli started apologizing. He went to Baby Billy's at the prayer center to apologize just in time to see Johnny Season's goons show up with masks on, trying to beat the crap out of Uncle Baby Billy. Eli interrupts that with his golden gun. There's that violence, that gun thing again. And the violence we've seen in the first couple episodes where there was Eli was smacking people, his children. Violence is not too far from some of these people most of the time. Now, I love the fact what Eli ended up doing to these guys after he had to pull his gun on them and stop them. He tells them, get naked. Get naked. So he makes all these guys strip down completely. And then we get treated to male frontal nudity en masse. There's a whole bunch of them. Johnny Season's guys walking through the North Charleston Mall with nothing on. Most of them are clutching themselves like this, except for one bold guy who's just walking through, walking tall, walking through. Get naked. So I think we can count on that there will be continual greedy plots going on, and that Jesse's sons are going to continue to rebel against him. Especially Gideon. Gideon is on the take. He just wants the family money at this point. And as sad as that is, that your own child would be that kind of a Judas to you, you can kind of see from Jesse's rough behavior and the smacking that goes along with Eli smacking his children and his children turning around and smacking others, with the exception of Kelvin. I don't think I've seen Kelvin hit anybody yet. But sure enough, we've seen Jesse smacking his kids. And we have seen Judy smacking BJ. Okay, you guys, that was all I got away from those 2 episodes. I'm going to continue to watch on and make these videos. My internet is out right now, so I'm probably going to have to put up a ton of these things all at the same time, stagger them over a week or something, because I can't believe I don't have internet again. Pura vida. Welcome to Costa Rica.